The forest didn't just move, it growled. Lorena froze, her alien ears twitching, her forefingers gripping her spear tightly. Every leaf around her shimmered with tension. Every bird fell silent in fear. The jungle was too quiet now, and that meant one thing. Threxen was near. The alien soldiers behind her formed a tight circle, weapons raised, hearts pounding. They had entered the forbidden forest only because the human insisted. Now one of their scouts had disappeared, and a trail of blood marked the moss behind them. "Don't speak," Lorena whispered, her voice shaking. "He'll hear you breathe." Suddenly, branches cracked ahead. Then came a low, rumbling sound, too deep, too primal to be any machine. The bushes parted, and out stepped a human, not the predator, not the beast they feared, just Eli, the Earth explorer. Dressed in muddy survival gear, holding a piece of cooked meat in one hand and smiling. Behind him, something huge moved slow and silent like a ghost. The trees parted again, and Threxen stepped into view. Lorena's heart dropped into her stomach. The apex predator was more terrifying than the stories. Its skin was like black armor with glowing red streaks, its jaw filled with blade-like teeth. But it wasn't roaring, it wasn't hunting, it was sitting, calmly. Like a trained pet, it watched Eli with curious golden eyes. "What are you doing?" Lorena shouted in fear, aiming her plasma rifle. Eli raised one hand. Not to her, but to the beast. With a short whistle and a simple word down, Threxen lowered its body. Resting its massive head on Eli's lap, the alien soldiers stood. Frozen, one even fainted. Lorena took a step forward, disbelief in her eyes. "That thing should have torn you in half," she whispered. Eli looked up, still calm. "Only if I made it feel like it had to," he said, stroking the beast's thick neck. "She's not a monster, just..." "Misunderstood," Lorena's voice cracked. "Her name is Threxen, and she is a monster. She's killed dozens. It's torn ships apart, devoured men alive." "Yeah," Eli replied softly, "because no one tried this." He reached into his pocket and tossed a bone-shaped treat into Threxen's mouth. The beast purred, like a giant cat. Lorena's brain couldn't make sense of what she was seeing. This human had done something no alien, no warrior, no scientist could do. He had tamed the untamable. "Back at the station," she said slowly. "They said humans are dangerous." Eli gave a small laugh. "Only when we're scared?" He stood up, dusting off his pants. "But when we're calm, even predators follow." The jungle rustled again, and every soldier raised their guns except Eli. A small bird-like creature flew overhead, and the forest seemed to breathe again. "Come on," Eli said, looking at Lorena. "We have work to do, and she'll protect us better than your rifles ever will." Threxen stood, towering over everyone, but never growled, never hissed. She walked beside Eli like a trained hound. Lorena couldn't move, couldn't speak. All her life, she had feared the forbidden forest, but this human had just walked into it, found the most dangerous creature known to their world, and made it sit. As they walked deeper into the trees, Lorena followed, not by command, by curiosity. Something ancient and wild had shifted today, not just in the jungle, but in her. She whispered to herself as she walked behind the man and the beast. "You tamed our apex predator." "How?" And from above, in the thick branches, unseen eyes watched them, other predators. Confused, afraid, curious, the forbidden forest had a new king, but it wasn't the beast. It was the man who made her kneel with a whisper in a hand, and somewhere deep in the shadows, something bigger stirred a second roar. Louder and deeper echoed through the trees. Lorena stopped in her tracks. "What was that?" she asked, her voice tight. Eli didn't stop walking. He just smiled and said, "That, my friend, is next. Asterisk, the jungle never sleeps, but that night it went still." The alien camp outside the forbidden forest was in chaos. Soldiers argued, guards shouted, and scientists stared at the holoscreen that showed Threxen, the apex predator, peacefully sleeping beside a human. No chemicals, no implants, no collars. The alien doctor whispered in disbelief. "He's using nothing but behavior," snapped the commander. "That thing is a killing machine, and yet it hasn't killed him, the doctor replied. We need to understand why. Before it changes its mind, inside the tent, Lorena sat alone. She hadn't spoken since she returned from the forest with Eli and Threxen. She just kept replaying the moment in her mind, how the predator licked his hand like a pup. A soft growl broke her thoughts. She turned, hand reaching for her sidearm. But it wasn't Threxen. It was Eli, standing at the entrance of her tent, holding a datapad and a steaming mug tea. He offered, as if nothing was strange. As if the galaxy hadn't just been turned upside down. She stared at him. You sleep beside it. He nodded, sitting across from her. She trusts me, he said. Animals feel intention if you come. With fear or hate, they sense it. She's not just any animal, Lorena said. She eats warships. She also likes belly rubs, Eli replied with a grin. Lorena's eyes narrowed. You're not afraid of death? I'm more afraid of misunderstanding, Eli said, sipping his tea. Silence hung between them. Outside, Threxen lay like a dark mountain, her chest rising and falling slowly. She growled once, not in warning, but as if responding to something. Far away, suddenly, alarms shrieked. A red light pulsed through the camp. The soldiers rushed to defensive positions. Lorena and Eli ran outside. What they saw froze everyone in place. Another predator stood at the forest's edge, bigger. Scarred eyes glowing white. It was Black Claw. The only creature the aliens believed even Threxen feared. The two predators locked eyes. The camp held its breath. Eli didn't flinch. He stepped between them, slowly, arms out not as a threat but as a bridge. Easy, he whispered. You're hurt, aren't you? Black Claw snarled, baring sharp teeth. The soldiers aimed their weapons. Threxen let out a single growl, low and steady, then walked up beside Eli and sat down. What is happening? One alien whispered, They're not attacking. Another said in shock. Lorena shouted, Don't fire. No one shoots unless he gives the order. Eli moved closer to Black Claw. The beast trembled, not from rage, but from pain. A deep wound along its side dripped glowing blood. Eli dropped to his knees and opened his pack, pulling out bandages and healing gel. It's okay, he whispered. Let me help. The alien camp watched as the impossible happened again. The second predator, the enemy of everything, lowered its head and let the human touch it. Hours passed by morning. Black Claw lay resting beside Threxen near the trees. Both were calm. Both were silent. Eli sat between them like a peaceful warlord of monsters. Lorena stood nearby, eyes wide, arms crossed. How did you know it was hurt? I didn't, Eli said. I just guessed. She tilted her head. What if you were wrong? I'd be dead, he said, smiling. But sometimes you have to trust first. She looked at the two beasts. Powerful, dangerous, but no longer wild. They're not just animals to you, she said quietly. They're people with fur. He said softly. Just not the kind you're used to. That evening, the alien council demanded an explanation. Eli stood before them, calm, unarmed. Two massive predators waiting outside the chamber like loyal guardians. This is not control. He said, this is respect. The forest watched them now, not in fear, but in wonder. Days passed since the two deadly predators, Threxen and Black Claw, chose not to kill. Instead, they rested beside a human named Eli, and the aliens who once called this jungle cursed began calling it changed. Inside the base, whispers spread like wind. Have you seen the beasts? They obey him. No chains, no control collars, no sedatives. They kneel when he speaks. Even the alien children, once kept locked indoors, began sneaking peeks near the clearing, their tiny fingers gripping fences. Wide eyes shining with curiosity instead of fear. One child even tossed a glowing fruit toward Threxen, and the great predator gently sniffed it before rolling it back with her nose. Lorena watched all of this from the tower, arms folded, her thoughts twisted. She had trained for war, not peace, and yet peace stood before her in the shape of a human and two monsters. She climbed down and walked into the training zone. Eli was sitting between the beasts again, drawing in a datapad, sketching your pets. She asked, half mocking, half curious, recording behavior patterns. Eli replied calmly. Also, they're not pets, He pointed at Threxen. That one saved me from falling into a pit last night. He nodded at Black Claw, and that one blocked a storm for me with his body. Lorena stared at the two massive creatures lying like obedient hounds. She still couldn't believe this was real. You said animals follow respect, she said slowly. But these things, they follow you. Eli stood up, wiping his hands. I told you respect isn't a tool. It's a language. Lorena stepped closer to Threxen, her heart racing. The predator's eyes opened slowly, glowing softly. May I? She asked voice. Low, go slow, Eli said. Let her see your eyes. Lorena crouched and placed a trembling hand on the beast's thick fur. It was warm, alive, but not angry. And in that second, everything she was taught about fear, power, and survival shattered. She trusts you, she whispered. No, Eli corrected gently. She gave me a chance. And I never broke it. Just then, a tremor shook the ground beneath them. The sky shifted from blue to red as emergency lights flickered to life across the camp. What is it? Lorena asked. Grabbing her scanner, a voice crackled over the Comes perimeter breach, Sector 9. We have unauthorized movement. It's not local. Lorena's eyes narrowed. Not local? Eli frowned. You have poachers here, don't you? Before she could answer, Threxen stood up fast, growling not in warning but in alert. She sniffed the air, turned toward the deep woods, and gave a short, sharp cry. Black Claw joined her, pacing, muscles tense. They smell something. Eli said, Something wrong? The two beasts ran off into the trees. Eli didn't hesitate. He followed. Lorena cursed under her breath and sprinted after him. Through twisted vines and pulsing roots they moved. The jungle grew darker, heavier. The air thick with chemicals. They reached a clearing and stopped. There, on the far side, stood two alien poachers wearing breathing gear, holding sound cannons aimed at the forest. Behind them, three smaller predators lay twitching in pain, metal spikes in their necks, green smoke swirling around them. Eli stepped forward. Turn those off now. The poachers laughed. You think these monsters can be your pets? Their resource is human. Lorena raised her weapon, their lives. Before another word was spoken, Threxen burst from the trees like a shadow of death. She leaped. Over Eli, landed between him and the poachers, and growled deep and long. Black Claw followed silent but deadly, circling them like a vengeful spirit. The poachers panicked. Dropping one of their cannons, we'll leave. We'll leave, one shouted. Eli stepped forward calmly. Leave the weapons, leave the gear, and never return. The poachers ran, stumbling into the woods. Chased by the low growls of the beasts, Eli knelt beside the small injured creatures. Pulling out tools to help them, Lorena stood behind him, heart pounding, mind racing. She had seen strength before, but this was something else. A man who didn't fight with fire but with peace. A man who walked into the mouth of monsters and taught them to kneel. Eli was no longer just the human. He was now known in the jungle as the Crownless King. It began with whispers, then came stories, then came the visitors. Alien tribes who lived deep within the wild lands, forgotten by the stars, started coming out of hiding. They had heard that someone had calmed the death spirits. The black beast with red lines now bowed her head to a man without claws. Lorena stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the line of tribal aliens arrive. Painted with ash and feathers, they carried gift fruits, furs, and carved wooden idols, all laid down before Eli, who stood barefoot, feeding dried meat too. A small injured beast in his lap, one elder approached slowly. Holding up a staff made of bone and glowing crystal, his voice trembled. He speaks to the old ones, the hungry ones, and they listen. Eli smiled softly. I speak with care, not power. The elder placed the staff at Eli's feet. You are king, not by blood, but by trust, he said, then knelt. The rest followed, one by one. Warriors and children alike dropped to one knee, Threxen and Black Claw stood silently behind him, no chains, no orders, just loyalty. Lorena's heart pounded as she watched. She had never believed in gods, but now Looking at the beasts beside Eli and the way the tribes obeyed him, she wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Later that night around the fire, Lorena finally asked the question that haunted her. Why? You, Eli. Why do they follow you? Eli sipped from his wooden cup, eyes reflecting the firelight. Because I never lied to them, he said. They feel truth better than words. Lorena sat beside him, voice soft. Then what do you want? In return? Eli looked up. Nothing, but everyone wants something, she whispered. I just want them to live, he said, to stop dying because we fear them. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden, horrible scream, one that wasn't human or beast. A young tribal child ran into the camp. Covered in dust, crying, he pointed toward the deep north and said just one word. Grithik. Everyone froze. Even the beasts growled. Lorena whispered, That's a myth. But Eli was already standing. Tell me. The elder stepped forward, voice shaking. Long ago, there was one we never named, he said, something even Threxen feared. We called it Grithok, the devourer of kings. Fire crackled. The jungle hushed. According to legend, Grithok was not just a beast. It was the first predator, a creature so silent that even shadows feared it. It came only when the balance of the wild was broken, and now it had returned. Eli looked at Threxen, who growled low and deep, then at Black Claw, who was already walking in circles, agitated. They sense it. Eli said, It's real, without waiting. He grabbed his pack and stepped into the dark. Woods. Lorena chased after him. You're going toward it? Are you insane? Eli didn't slow down. If this thing wants to challenge the balance, he said, then I need to stand in its way. The jungle grew colder as they went deeper. Even the glowing plants seemed dimmer. The air heavy like before a storm. Suddenly, the ground ahead cracked open. Out stepped Grithok. It was huge, twice the size of Black Claw, with skin like obsidian and eyes like black mirrors. Its mouth dripped with acid, its legs like iron pillars. Even the trees bent away from it. Threxen stopped walking, her body trembling not from fear, but something deeper. Respect mixed with dread. Eli took a slow step forward. Lorena shouted, No, it'll kill you. Grithok growled, a sound so low it shook the bones. Then it charged. Lorena screamed. Tch! But Eli didn't move. At the very last second, Threxen jumped in front, slamming into Grithok. Black Claw lunged from the side, biting into the beast's leg. The jungle exploded into chaos. Eli ran toward the wounded child. Shielding them with his body, Lorena covered him as trees fell and dust stormed around them. But in the middle of that wild battle, something changed. Grithok paused. Its black eyes locked onto Elanot with hate but recognition. It stopped attacking, backed away slowly. Then, with a final roar, it vanished into the woods, leaving broken earth behind. Silence returned. The jungle held its breath. Lorena turned to Eli, shocked. What just happened? Eli looked at the trees, breathing hard. He tested me, he said. And for now, I passed. The jungle was quiet, but not out of fear this time. It was quiet. Out of respect, Grithok's the oldest predator had come. It had seen Eli, and it had walked away. Now, every tree, every bird, every crawling thing watched the human with new eyes, not as prey, not as danger, but as something else. Back at the camp, Lorena sat in silence. She hadn't slept since the encounter. Her hands were still trembling from the memory. He didn't fight it, she whispered to herself. He stood still, and it stopped. She looked out the tent flap, where Eli sat on a stone, Threxen beside him, her eyes closed, breathing slow. Black Claw on the other side, licking a torn paw. The two apex beasts rested like loyal sentinels, but Eli looked tired. She walked out, standing in front of him. Why didn't it kill you? She asked, voice soft. Eli opened his eyes and replied, Because I wasn't there to take power. I was there to protect balance. Lorena sat beside him. For the first time in her life, she saw something deeper in the human's eyes. Not just strength, but wait, he carried something invisible. But heavy. Do they love you? she asked, looking at the beasts. Eli looked at Threxen and smiled faintly. I don't know if it's love, he said, but I know this. They would die for me, and I would die for them. Lorena had heard stories of bonded soldiers, of hive minds, of military loyalty, but this was built on trust, not programming, on moments shared in silence, not commands shouted in fear. Later that day, alien scientists arrived from orbit, clad in white suits, floating scanners, and hovering labs. They didn't bow, didn't kneel, didn't understand. We've come to study the bonding process, the lead researcher said coldly. Step aside, human. Eli stood calmly, arms crossed. No, he said simply. You can observe, but not interfere. The scientist frowned. You're not in charge here. Threxen growled once deep and slow. The sound shattered to scanners and caused a hover drone to crash. Eli didn't flinch. She's in charge, he said, nodding to the beast. I'm just the one who listens best. The researchers backed off, and for the first time, aliens began writing down something new, not just creature behavior, but human empathy. In the days that followed, something beautiful began to grow. Alien children approached the jungle edges. They brought fruit, soft cloths, toys carved from stone, and the beasts allowed it. Threxen let one child tie a flower around her horn. Black Claw rolled gently in the grass, while two kids climbed on his back. Laughing, the soldiers no longer carried weapons. The tribes no longer hid. The jungle no longer attacked. Lorena walked with Eli to the hill overlooking the valley, a place where vines hung like curtains and the sky opened wide. This is your doing, she said quietly. Eli shook his head. No, he replied. This was always possible. I just showed them it was safe to try. She turned to him. You could lead a planet with this power. Or a fleet, she added. He smiled faintly. I'm not a ruler, but they follow you, she said, pointing at the beasts. They guard your heart. He looked out across the land. I don't need a throne, he said. This peace is enough. Lorena took a breath. Then what comes next? Eli turned to her. His eyes were tired but clear. Something worse is watching, he said quietly. And when it comes, they'll be ready. Lorena felt the chill in his words. She looked at Threxen, who now watched the stars with alert eyes. Black Claw had stopped playing, his tail still. There was a calm over the land. But Eli knew it was the kind of calm before. A storm, something darker than any beast, something that doesn't grow in forests, but in greed, in chains, in machines. The stars were no longer peaceful. They blinked, then flickered. Then one by one, they disappeared. Eli looked up from the jungle clearing beside him. Threxen growled, low and uneasy. Black Claw raised his head and sniffed the air, confused. The animals of the forest beasts, birds even. Insects began to retreat into silence. Lorena came running toward him, face pale, holding a datapad. They're here, she said breathlessly. Who? Eli asked. Even though he already knew the syndicate, she whispered. The hunters from orbit. Eli clenched his fists. The syndicate wasn't a government. It wasn't a tribe. It was a market cold and greedy. It sold weapons, fear, and life itself. And it had heard about his jungle, about the predators. And the human who led them, they think it's a zoo, Lorena said bitterly. They're calling it a resource opportunity. A loud screech shattered the sky. Dozens of dark metallic ships broke through the clouds, casting shadows over the trees. Each ship was covered in steel claws and thick nets. Drones with glowing red eyes flew ahead, scanning, tagging, tracking. Threxen stood, tail lashing. Black Claw roared a sound not of challenge, but warning. The jungle responded. 100 eyes glowed in the dark. Wolves, birds, serpents, horned, panthers all moving into position. Eli turned to Lorena. Get the children underground, he said. What about you? She asked, voice trembling. I'll stay with them, he said. They're not tools. They're my people. The ships began releasing nets of light containment fields. Any creature caught inside was shocked into paralysis. 3 beasts fell within seconds. Screaming in pain, Eli whistled sharply. Lexan leaped into action, slamming into a drone and tearing it apart with her jaws. Black Claw vanished into the trees like a shadow, reappearing atop a ship, clawing at its engines. The sky turned into a war zone, but the Syndicate was prepared. They brought sound weapons. Waves of high-frequency pulses burst across the trees. Confusing the animals, Eli dropped to his knees, clutching his ears. The jungle cried out in agony. Even Threxen stumbled, confused and growling in pain. Then a voice echoed from the ships. Smooth, artificial, emotionless. Stand down, human. Surrender the beasts. Your authority here is void. Eli looked up, bleeding from one ear. He pressed his hand to the ground and whispered, "They are not mine," he said. "But I will still stand for them." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a tiny, blinking seed. "Are you really going to try that?" Lorena asked from behind a tree. "I didn't come here with weapons," Eli said, "but I learned from this world." He pressed the seed into the soil and closed his eyes. For a moment, nothing. Then the trees moved, roots cracked, the ground vines shot into the air, the jungle itself rose in defense. The beasts weren't just protecting the land was now protecting them. Thorny roots shot up, slamming into drones, wrapping around ships and pulling them down. Explosions lit the sky. But the jungle did not burn it. Fought Threxen let out a roar that echoed across valleys. Every creature answered, an army without armor, but full of heart. Eli climbed onto a fallen log and shouted through a speaker, "This is a sanctuary," he yelled. "Not for sale, not for cages, not for your profit." The lead Syndicate ship turned toward him, charging its cannon. Lorena screamed, "Eli, get down!" But just as the beam fired, a massive shape blocked the shot. Grithik, the devourer of kings, the ancient beast of silence. It returned not to test but to defend. The blast hit Grithok's side, but the creature didn't fall. It turned toward the ship and charged with a roar that shattered wind. The Syndicate ships, seeing their best weapons crushed, began to retreat. One by one, they pulled back into the sky. Dragging broken nets and lost pride behind them, the forest fell silent. Again, smoke drifted through the air. The wounded were tended. The beasts returned to their places. Eli sat on the jungle floor. Exhausted, Threxen curled beside him, one paw gently over his leg. Black Claw rested his massive head on Eli's lap, and Grithik stood nearby, silent but watching. Lorena sat next to him and whispered, "They brought machines, weapons, threats, and you answered with roots and trust." Eli didn't speak. He just looked up at the broken sky and said quietly, "They'll come again. Next time, we'll be more than ready." The sky was quiet again, but it wasn't the same. Where once flew the machines of greed, now floated clouds of healing rain. Where once was fear of predators, now echoed songs of respect. The jungle had changed, but more than that, Eli had changed. The world, weeks passed, no ships returned. The Syndicate had vanished, humiliated. Scarred, afraid of the one place their prophet could not touch, alien councils tried to reach out. Some offered Eli medals, positions, even planets. Others feared him, saying he had too much influence over the wild. One ambassador called him the beast whisperer who commands armies without armies. But Eli refused every crown, every uniform, every name that made him sound bigger than the truth. "I'm not a king," he said again and again. "I just listened when no one else would." Back in the jungle, the wounded had healed. Threxen now wore ceremonial paint from the forest tribes. Black Claw carried children on his back during morning walks. And even Grithik, once the ghost of fear, now lay at peace in the shade of the valley. No longer a monster, just ancient. And watching Lorena walked beside Eli near the river where it all began. The water sparkled with light, birds sang overhead, and vines bloomed with color. This place used to be cursed, she said. Now it feels like home. Eli smiled. Because someone finally treated it like home, she stopped walking, heart beating faster. "Are you going back?" she asked quietly. "To Earth? To the stars?" Eli looked at the sky, then at the beasts, then at her. "No," he said softly. "I came as a visitor. But I'm staying as a guardian, tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the deep knowing that something rare had happened. This human hadn't just changed a planet, he had become part of it that night. The forest tribes gathered once more, not in fear but to celebrate. The ceremony was unlike anything ever seen. Fire danced between trees. Children painted stories onto rocks. Beasts and aliens shared space without cages, without chains, without without fear. Eli stood barefoot again, this time not alone, Lyrena beside him, smiling. And behind them, Threxen, Black Claw, and Grithok, like living statues of ancient gods. A young tribal leader stepped forward, holding a carved stone. On it was the image of a man, with beasts on either side. Below the image were words etched in many languages. But the message was one. He did not conquer the wild, he became part of it. Eli took the stone, but said nothing. He didn't need to. The forest spoke for him. Now, every leaf that swayed, every beast that knelt, every child that laughed, they were all his words. Later, as the stars returned to peace, Lyrena asked him one last question. Will you ever leave this place? Eli looked out at the jungle, at the trees that had grown taller, at the scars that had healed, at the beasts who slept without fear, and he said, I will leave only when I am forgotten, but I think it won't be for a long, long time. And so, the humans stayed, not in a castle, not in a tower, but under the open sky, among beasts, among trees, among hearts that no longer feared. And somewhere in the stars, stories began to spread of a man with no army who walked with monsters and made them kneel. Not with power, but with peace.